Good day, everybody. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner, deep into Lent. Yes, we into Lent. And the theme today, with His grace, is keeping it real for our future. I don't know where he's going with this, keeping it real for our future in Lent and having a conversation. But let us welcome Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon. Welcome, sir.
How are you doing, Reverend Deacon?
I'm buckling up from all now. I'm not sure where you're taking us with keeping it real for our future.
Well, one thing with me, I always trying to keep it real. Huh? You know that. I always trying to keep it real, no matter what. This one might be a tough little one for some, and that's okay. But I think it's an important one because, I think it was Bob Marley who said people who don't know the history have no destiny. And if we don't understand our history, then we don't understand our present and we don't understand our future. So this one, this one for the boys.
This one's for the boys? I see that you're also quoting some boys inside here. So yeah. I'm interested to see how you crystallize this and the conversation that you're going to have with us. So I'm going to bowl the first ball. Archbishop Jake, is Trinidad and Tobago a real place? That's the question. Is it a real place?
Well, let me start by saying one of the greatest characteristics of us as Trinbagonians, one of the best characteristics, is that we could make fun of anything. I don't care what you do, we could make it into a wonderful joke. Why do I say that's one of our best characteristics? Because it saves us from the worst of us. And it saves us from the worst negativity that goes into an explosion. It saves us from the harshness of life. And we could see the most foolish thing happen. And if you have 3 Trinidadians here, somebody making a joke out of it. Somebody making a joke out of it. That's us. By jest and humor, the tricky Dadian pokes fun at individuals, at groups, at anything. But by doing that, we diffuse the challenge. The other day, I was with a group of people, and a person's car, the front tire came off and went ahead of the car. Well, that was a joke. That's how we kind of naturally default to dealing with the challenge. I think it's part of our national psyche. It's the way that we take wherever we go. You meet Trinidadians in England, in America, in any part of the world. And it's the same thing, We poke fun at the most serious thing. As we would say to one another very often, thing to cry and man laughing. Thing to cry, And the joke and the humor becomes unreal. That's us. That's our national psyche. That's the way we have done this. Good, bad, or different, that remains to be seen.
I think that's why, they don't have more revolutions in Trinidad and Tobago. Because men will poke fun at a situation.
Yes.
I remember watching 2 trucks coming in opposite directions, right? One for one political party, the other one for the other political party. And the banter before when they broke up, in terms of who you're voting for and down with the next party. And as the trucks came by, fellas were sharing drinks, fellas were...
Absolutely.
Even though the political elite were pushing people to separate and to divide as the trucks came part of the opposing campaign.
The people knew their business.
The people knew their business.
The people knew their business. The people in the old time days when they had the old Bailey Bridge, a truck got stuck under the Bailey Bridge. And well, they bring the engineers and they start to dismantle the bridge, you know. And a whole crowd gather around. A little schoolboy passed by. But why only don't let down the tires? Well, you know, the humor, everybody, big engineers, eh? Big engineers. And they look around at each other. Everybody laugh. Everybody busted pecan on each other. They let down the tires and they leave the people bridge alone. They were ready to dismantle the bridge to move the truck, you know. But that is us. That is the part of our national psyche. You know, in this campaign which I picked up on last week, Trinidad is not a real place. You know, it's a big hashtag. Trinidad is not a real place. They have a Facebook. They have a this or that. There's the opposite side. Trinidad is a real place. There's so much humor in it, and we have to understand that. Huh? With people making light of what could be potentially very, very explosive. The one meme shows some people liming or people around on beach chairs around a pothole. Hashtag Trinidad is not a real place. In other words, our hot pothole is so big they could be a swimming pool. We could take a lime around a pothole in Trinidad. Hashtag Trinidad is not a real place. You know, the point is that this is a terrible situation. It really, we should not be tolerant of potholes where we could have beach chairs around and throw a pool line around a beach chair. We should not, you know, be tolerant of that. But at the same time, you know, we make fun of many terrible situations to cause a reaction, but also to make a point.
Yeah. It is to make a point.
Make the point. and the fun and the laughter, the mirth and the joy is always there. And that's why from the other islands they will always call us the Trinidadian. Now, what we have to understand is that the trickster is an archetype. There are four dominant archetypes in our psyche. The warrior, the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. So the four dominant archetypes. The trickster is part of the magician archetype. And the magician could not just do magic, but could take base metal and turn it into gold, alchemy. Could see the humor in the worst or the best. Also is the engineer that could make things out of nothing. It's a good spiritual director. It's a shaman. It's the spiritual leader. It's a prophet. So we have to see in this trickster energy, the Calypsonian is a trickster. Because many times, like Bach Stalin turned shaman to the nation when he sang Feeling to Party. David Arada turned shaman to the nation when he sang Another Day in Paradise. Chalky has turned shaman to the nation so many times in his calypsos when he was pushing on us to see what we don't want to see. And so we have to see the trickster or the Trinidadian energy as part of our national psyche, part of who we are. And yes, it have good, it have bad, it have ugly, but yes, that is part of what we are doing. So when we say Trinidad is not a real place, hashtag, the hashtag takes the place of a very violent confrontation. Because a man might mash up a car in a pothole like that, you know. It asks, are we for real? Are we for real? That's another way of putting it.
Yeah.
Which we also will say, are we for real? It calls citizens to question why they put up with intolerant situations. Why? You know, and it also is one way to disarm, to highlight the absurd, and to do so in a real Trini way. Trinidad is not a real place. This is not a real place. Now, we have to hear that humorous, tricky Dadian side of it, because that's the side where most Trinidadians connect. They had a YouTube or Facebook blogger and basically said, if I don't say that, what I will say would be so terrible. It's best I say this. It's best I say this. It would be so terrible. Now, I think this approach has saved us from many an explosion and from great discomfort in so many ways. Huh? And from this perspective, I understand the Trini way. I understand the energy. I understand the energy around the hashtag Trinidad is not a real place. But this is not the only consequence, I think, of the campaign. And I think that's where we have to consider.
Well, I want to see where you're going here. If you see that this is not the only consequence of this campaign, which is hashtag Trinidad is not a real place. No, I mean, you know, we see it, but I want to encapsulate that sometimes. Storm coming to Trinidad. I don't need to tell you anything. They throw in a party for the storm, you know, somewhere.
No, we are the people where they had a national emergency, a state of emergency, the whole nation. The nation locked down, curfew from 6 to 6, and we train curfew parties. Yeah, men skating in the party just before curfew start, and men skating out the party as soon as gone home, bathed, changed, gone to work, skating back to the party. That's why people say this is not a real place. Because we do things so differently from other nations. Another nation have a state of national emergency, everybody lock up in the home, everybody real serious, everybody on edge, everybody jittery, and everybody triggering off everybody else. No, not us. Not us at all. We run a party, you know? But that's not the only way to see this hashtag. And that's what I want to emphasize. You know, there is a colonial debate that goes way back in our history. And I think we need to know our history, and we need to understand that we have a history of this Trinidad or Caribbean or West Indies not being a real place. And we have to understand that while this is a modern hashtag with a particular intention, there is an ancient reading of it that works deep in our unconscious that we must also be very aware of. Because what we don't want to succumb to historical ignorance and repeating words of the colonizer in ways that undermine our own confidence and our own psyche and our own commitment to transformation at the end of the day. I think words are important. I think words are really, really important.
The power of the word, but the power of the word. Yeah.
In a Rapso styling, Better Resistance, Lancelot Lane. Words are so important. And we must always understand the consequences of our words, as we must always understand the consequences of our action. Words convey meaning, and sometimes they have multiple meanings, multiple consequences. And that's why I want to pause on this hashtag Trinidad is not a real place, because we have multiple meanings, we have multiple consequences. Some ideas can actually undermine us in ways that we can't even imagine, and we don't see it when it's coming. And you know, I believe that the hashtag Trinidad is not a real place resonates with a colonial wound that we could, if we're not careful, undermine the necessary healing that we require as a post-colonial nation.
Hold on a minute. Hold on. You say that this resonates with a colonial wound. I want to see where you're going with this colonial wound thing, you know.
Yeah.
We're talking 2020, we're talking 2023.
Yeah. I talking a deep wound in the psyche of this nation. That's what I'm talking about. A deep wound in the psyche of this nation that resonates with hashtag Trinidad is not a real place. Resonance is a thing from physics.
Yes.
When you have something that is vibrating at one frequency and something next to it that is normally could vibrate at that same frequency, this one will set this one into motion if they have resonance. Resonance is about frequency. An example of that, if you ever played a guitar, when you're tuning a guitar, when the fourth and the fifth string are in tune, and you pluck one, the other one is set in motion without touching it.
That's resonance.
So by plucking one,
yeah,
the next one set in motion, that's resonance. And I'm saying that Trinidad is not, hashtag Trinidad is not a real place, has a resonance with a very old colonial wound that we have to know. And we have to be careful, because that wound has really gotten at the psyche of many of our best and brightest. Huh? Many of the best and brightest.
So are you seeing that that has affected them positively or negatively, or both?
I'm seeing it's affected all of us, and we just don't understand it. And I'm seeing that the resonance of Trinidad is not a real place, if we don't understand, could set in motion this colonial wound, and it could do something to us that we just don't understand. That's all I'm saying.
I want to hear where you went with this one, and how it is going to affect us, and the possibility of it affecting us in a negative way.
So hashtag Trinidad is not a real place, I believe, could be very destructive. If we don't understand, beyond the fun, there's another side. And I also want to say it could actually lead us to deep paralysis.
Now, paralysis means you're stuck, you can't move, right?
And it could lead us to deep paralysis, because it could undermine our self-confidence. And it could leave us right at the stage where we are making fun of. But the point of the trickster and the shaman, or the point of the trickster from the shamanic perspective, is to poke the fun to be able to bring transformation. But this sometimes could poke the fun in a way that we throw up our hands and say, well, this is not a real place. In other words, we are not real people, and we don't have to do nothing real. That's just how it is. And it could actually lead us, rather than the energy of transformation, it could lead us into a despair. And it could become a cry of despair that there's nothing that we can do here that would be of any great benefit to anybody, including ourselves. So what we need most, I think, at this stage of our history is not criticism, is not despair. We need some good analysis and we need evaluation. Because in the higher levels of cognitive activity, analysis and evaluation, and the last one is create. So creativity, or the capacity to create. We need the capacity to create and to recreate ourselves as a society to take us to the next stage. If we stick ourselves in the despair, then we never get to the analysis, we never get to the evaluation, we never get to the creation. And we get stuck right where we are for another generation or another however long. And I'm saying in the higher cognitive capacities that we need, that all people need, we could stick ourselves in the lower functions and therefore let the steam out, so we never get to the higher functions where create is the ultimate cognitive function. And we need that. We need that in the most drastic and the most real sense.
You know, you're bringing me back to our last week's conversation when you talked about analyzing, evaluating, and creating.
Yep.
You know, which was a higher form.
You know? And that's why I'm going back to that, because it's the only way I could help us all understand that criticism, as important as it might be in the hierarchy of cognitive development, is a very, very low form. And it doesn't produce the results we think it produces. And making fun of it, or poking fun or anger at what is wrong, still is stymied, and it's stopping short of the real responsibility. The real responsibility is to analyze, to evaluate, and to create. That's the real responsibility. But when we don't, when we spend all of our time criticizing, making fun, and then ending up, well, this is not a real place. What we actually doing is we letting the steam out of the pressure cooker just at the moment that we need the steam to move us to the next stage, which is analysis, evaluation, and creation.
I think
we keep stopping short.
Yeah. I think what you had said the last time in your last conversation was that if we allow it, it can then guide our action and generate positive change.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's like the pressure cooker. Yeah. Just when you have some red peas in there, and just when it's about to tenderize the red peas, you raise the thing and you let the steam out. and that's what our knack of criticism and poking fun is doing for us right now. Whereas what we need is a little more steam in there to build the head towards analysis. What is the real problem? And evaluation, and then creation, that we start to create the thing in a new and a better way.
Okay.
So that's really, really where we are. So these lands, they weren't set up for the development of the population. You know? We were not intended to make a real contribution to the world. That is except for the wealth that was extracted from the region that made Spain extremely rich under the reign of Philip II. Or the sugar plantation colonies that caused Britain to become the next world superpower, launching the Industrial Revolution. It was when Britain, extracted the wealth. When Spain, Philip II became one of the richest monarchs at that time, because he extracted all the gold and the wealth that he could have from these islands, and the ships going to Spain were laden with booty, booty stolen from the region. That's the best way I could. But then when we had the West Indian Federation, the British West Indies, it was clear to everybody who lived in the British West Indies that the really real was not here. The really real was the metropole. Everybody knew that. All the policies, the laws, the fashion, the customs, all the habits didn't come from us. It all came imported in from the metropole, and we lived according to those laws, customs, and habits. You know, the other thing that we have to understand is that for us, we have to understand that it was the wealth of sugar that fueled the Industrial Revolution in England. If Britain didn't annex all of the sugar plantations that it did, it had Barbados and Jamaica, and if it didn't get all the other ones, Trinidad and Antigua, it had Guadeloupe and Martinique for a while. If they didn't annex Dominica and St. Lucia and all these other islands, it would not have had the money for the Industrial Revolution. And in that sense, we were important only insofar as we were the ATM for Europe.
Wow. The ATM for Europe.
Yeah, because there's just cash in from us. I mean, it's so bizarre. There's a historical joke during the French-English War. As Britain was going to war, contemplated should it go to war with France. A telegram comes from Barbados. Go ahead, England. Barbados is behind you. Now you laugh. Eh? You laugh. But what you don't understand is that at that stage, late 1700s, the wealth of England was really in Barbados. The sugar planters of Barbados control a lot of the wealth flowing into England. If they said they're not backing and they're going to stop the wealth flowing to England, England would not have been able to finance the war. So we have to understand.
Little England had so much power. You know, they call Barbados Little England.
And that's why they call it the jewel in the crown. But we don't understand that about ourselves. We don't understand there was a time when the geopolitics of the world revolved around us, just like it revolves around the Middle East because of the oil. What oil is in the world right now, sugar was in the world back then. And the geopolitics revolved around us, and so many were brought in slavery, and so many were brought as indentured slave servants, and they weren't brought here to make a nation for themselves. They were brought here to serve the metropole and its wealth. So we have to understand that. And in that sense, you can say Trinidad is not a real place, because we weren't set up to be real. We were actually set up to be vassals of somebody else's empire, to serve them and their wealth production. So the decisions made in England and all the policies, everything there. When V.S. Naipaul wrote Mimic Men, he was saying something that's really serious, you know. He's saying we are not a real place because all we could do is mimic the really real. Europe, England, America. All we could do is mimic. When the Americans came down to Trinidad and set up the base, everybody started to talk with an American accent.
As soon as they pass Caranage, you're talking.
Yeah. I mean, in my day, we say people is only reached Piarco Airport and they don't get a Yankee accent already. So when we say Trinidad is not a real place, these are the historical antecedents to the hashtag that we have to understand. And we have to understand when Naipaul says we are mimic men, what he's saying is that we don't have a center of gravity that is ours, that holds us in a culture, custom, a civilization that has its own internal logic. That's what Naipaul is saying. And that has its own challenges. Here a quote from Naipaul in his famous book, The Middle Passage. He says, "How can the futility of the West Indian history be written? What tone shall the historical adopt? History is built around achievements and creation, and nothing was created in the West Indies." In other words, Trinidad is not a real place. The West Indies is not a real place. I mean, I could summarize Naipaul's quote by hashtag, not a real place. And we have to understand that. But the challenge goes worse, you know. The very negative tone of Naipaul dismissing our history as a history of futility, with no achievements, no creation. This has been one of the great challenges of the earlier generations, a challenge that haunts us at every turn and has been haunting us for 130-something years or longer. And that challenge about how do we take this West Indian civilization, this Antillean civilization, how do we approach it? How do we face it? How do we evaluate it? How do we understand our creation? And by saying we are not a real place, we are saying that the British were right in colonizing, and we are saying that when the colonization ended, we are not capable of taking responsibility for charting our own destiny and for moving us from being set up for empire to serving the citizens of this beloved and beautiful and wonderful country that we have.
Wow. You know, now, I'm not going to debate you because I can say, well, hey, we created pan, you know, we created calypso, we created reggae
that's my point.
Antillean people, you know,
and so much more, and so much more,
and so much more, yeah,
so much more. We have produced world-class citizens in every sphere of excellence, every field of endeavor. You will find Trinidadians all over the world who have been at the very top of their game in various professions throughout the world. I mean, at one stage, we had the fastest man alive, and we had the most beautiful woman alive twice. 1.4 million people in this nation. And that's just a start. We produced one of the most outstanding cricketers that have ever lived. Brian Lara is one of the legends of cricket. In India, they revere that man. But we don't see it so. We don't see it that way. So there is no field of excellence where you can't find a Trinidadian at the very top cutting edge of the game. I mean, Howard University, that historically Black American university, right now, the person running it is a Trinidadian. Okay? So they everywhere we go. So it's not that we are not a real, and it's not that we lack anything at all. Yet here at home, we somehow seem to lack the confidence to build upon the great legacy of these men and women who have blazed the trail before us. And I don't know why we lack the confidence. And I don't know why we stop short of analysis by sticking to criticism and by sticking to just demeaning and tearing down and the negativity. I don't know why we get stuck in the lower cognitive functions and we don't allow ourselves to come up to the next one. When we move to analysis, then you start to not only understand how bad the thing is, but why it is bad. And when you move to evaluation, you understand not only why it is bad, but what we could do and how other people have acted to move from here to somewhere else. And when you go to creation, then you understand how you transform your society. in alignment with its own inner values and in alignment with its all that is best of us.
Do you think colonialism has something to do with that, where we are like crabs in a barrel? I mean, we spoke about this last week. You know,
yes.
crabs in a barrel. Instead of helping each other to get out of the barrel, we pull it everybody
pulling each other down. And that's what we do when we end in the criticism.
Yeah.
In the criticism, rather than being constructive, finding a way forward, we end up pulling each other down and everybody climbing over each other in the same barrel. We have failed to find inspiration for the monumental challenges that we face today. And it's not because we're not bright enough. We have some really great human beings in this country who are really capable of enormous tasks. But for some reason, we are lacking the self-confidence, we are lacking the inner cohesion, we are lacking the composure, we are lacking a sense of common identity. And rather than using the real gifts that we have for building our nation, we're using it to criticize, we're using it to divide, we're using it to tear down, for some reason. And that's just a stage of development that we're at. And I'm saying it's a stage of development. We're not going to be here forever. We will not be here forever. We will grow out of this stage. You know, it's like we're in an adolescent stage. What do adolescents do? They see you're in an idealistic stage, and so you get jaded when you see the faults, and you see the inconsistencies, and you see the things that are wrong. You get jaded, and you get stuck there rather than being able to build from there, move forward.
Is it because we're still juvenile in terms of our own, formation?
Well, we're still juvenile. It's only 60 years we're a nation, you know.
Well, that's what I mean.
When America was a nation for 60 years, they were at each other in war. Okay? they were at each other. They didn't settle the Civil War. In fact, they still haven't settled it 200 and something years later. They haven't settled it. That divide between the North and the South has not been settled for them. They're a big industrial nation, put man on the moon and have more nuclear weapons than everybody else, etc., etc. They still haven't settled it. We're only 60 years old. And we have to understand that. But that is not an excuse for us not doing better either. Gotcha. We can't just say, well, we're only 60 years, what do you expect? No. We are 60 years old and we have to start growing up and doing it really, really quick. Because the world is not waiting on us. I mean, when you talk about the pan, I mean, we've invented the only musical instrument in the 20th century that is being played in Japan, in Korea, and all parts of the world. And we have not found a way to make that work for us as a nation. We've just not found a way to do that. So it works for us in one way, but it doesn't work for us as a business. Another business would have made that as one selling point of Trinidad that would have brought big money into the country. We haven't done that. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. But here's my second layer of the colonial legacy. Yeah? Just about 130 years ago or so, the Oxford history professor, James Anthony Froude, had his trip on a sailing ship through the West Indies. And he wrote a book, The English in the West Indies. And in this book, Froude says, there are no people there in the true sense of the word.
What?
Now, this is one of the eminent historians of England in the late 1800s, okay? One of the eminent historians. And in his book, I have a copy of the book, The British in the West Indies, he say, there are no people there in the true sense of the word. Now, that set off a 130-year debate, okay? It set up one mega debate. Here's the thing, What he's saying is, in other words, hashtag Trinidad is not a real place. Hashtag West Indies is not a real place. That's what he's saying. And that's why I want people to understand while I understand the Trinidadian funny way of dealing with it, there's another side that we must also understand. And what does Froude say? We are not a real place. Well, that started a debate that is still raging to today. There was a schoolmaster. Now, back in the late 1800s, the schoolmaster was one of the few educated people in a village. And J.J. Thomas had written the Creole grammar, which had been widely acclaimed, one of its kind, where he took the grammar of the Trinidad and Tobago dialect and wrote a scholarly work on this grammar. The man spoke French, he spoke English, he spoke Latin, Greek, Latin and Greek he could read. He had all kinds he was really a linguist. So Thomas took up this challenge and he wrote a book and he called it Fraudacity. The audacity of Froude. The audacity of Froude. And his book was titled Fraudacity, West Indian Fables by J.A. Froude, explained by J.J. Thomas. So J.J. Thomas, a school principal in the South in the Naparimas, writes this book, a full-length book, challenging Froude, who says that the West Indies is not a real place, that there are no people there in the true sense of the word. And Thomas takes him to task. He goes to England and he lectures in England, raising the consciousness of how the colonizer is treating the West Indies and why this attitude is really despicable. And a huge debate is set in motion. A huge debate. The audacity of Froude. I love it. I have a copy of that one too. It's now out of print. Beacon Books reprinted it in the late 1970s, early 1980s. Beacon Books reprinted it because it was out of print, and is out of print again. He chastens the Oxford professor with his logic and humbles him with riveting rebuttal. Now, what I want you to see in this is, having been insulted, or having the Oxford professor of history, one of the top historians of England, having insulted the whole West Indies, we didn't make a hashtag and make fun of it. What J.J. Thomas did was he analyzed what Froude said. Watch me again, eh? He evaluated.
I'm following you.
He evaluated what Froude said, and then he created, by creating the book and doing the lecture series, he moved the psyche of the Caribbean mind to a fierce response to what was clearly a colonial imperial perspective that was wider than Froude. And he stood his grounds in a rebuttal of Froude that allowed the West Indies to understand, nah, we better than that. We better than that. You know, like Paul, Rudder has a beautiful little song, Another Day in Paradise. He says the fable on the cable, that Nike psychology, them are better than we. Believe in yourself, then the chant going to make sense. And what Rudder was getting at was the same thing, that we have lost confidence in ourselves. J.J. Thomas wasn't a schoolman. He never went to big university, didn't have letters behind his name, but he did an analysis that stands to today, okay, of the eminent Oxford professor and historian. And then he did an evaluation of him. And then he created. And he opens a space for all West Indian people to see this is a real place. And we are real people. And they have real people here in the true sense of the word.
So let's pause here on that one, right? Keeping it real for our future. Now, something you said earlier on in this conversation, if you don't know your past, if you don't know your history, then how are you going to move forward? And I just want to see this then, because you are saying our boy J.J. Thomas is out of print. And to me, these historical pieces should be in our schools so that our people can then see, but hey,
we should be teaching him.
Correct.
We should be teaching him. Every school child should know about Froude and J.J. Thomas. Every school child.
Totally agree.
Now, when Beacon Books reprinted Fraudacity, it was nearly 100 years after J.J. Thomas had written it. Everybody should know the name C.L.R. James. C.L.R. James is one of the brightest West Indian intellectuals that we have had, a Trinidadian. He and Eric Williams just happened to get into a little spat, and that didn't get nice. But C.L.R. James is one of the fine minds of the West Indies, and he went for the reprinting. James wrote a little introduction to Fraudacity. Here's what he says. Fraudacity is a reply to an imperialist attack, an attack ignorant and myopic as usual, but this time malign and motivated. That is evil and motivated. The attack was a sitting duck for a counter blow. The reply to imperial grime, unfortunately, is not often, even to this day, as clear, as firm, as precise as was the reply in the West Indian to the attack upon his people. This book is a masterpiece. This is to say, worth reading and studying. Close study, today, nearly a century after it was written.
C.L.R. James.
So I want to, and the reason why I'm highlighting this is not because we had this thing back then, but a British historian who was eminent makes a statement, not a real place, or no people here in the true sense of the word. J.J. Thomas, according to C.L.R. James' analysis, the reply to the imperialist grime, unfortunately, is not often, even to this day, as clear, as firm, as precise as it was to the reply of that West Indian. So what James is saying is J.J. Thomas's reply was great analysis, great evaluation, and created a space for the West Indian psyche to recognize we are a real place, we are real people, and we must take our place in the sun. You know another time when that happened, boy? Another time when that happened was it was either the late 50s or the early 60s, when the cricket team, West Indies cricket, went to Lord's and was facing Australia. And the Australian captain said, we're going to make them grovel.
The Australian or the English captain?
The English captain. We're going to make them grovel.
Right,
the English captain. We're going to make them grovel. And those West Indian boys made the whole English side grovel. That's when the West Indies realized we are not a second-class place. We have real people, and cricket was the game of the elite in England who had the leisure to play the game. Is a game of strategy, is a game of skill, is a game of talent, is a game of all kinds of things. And when we beat England at their own game in the most famous cricket mecca of the world, Lords, it said to the world, you know, nah, them are better than we, to quote David Rudder. We are a real place. When we lose our confidence, as we have now as a nation, when we lose our confidence, then what happens is, rather than going to the analysis, going to the evaluation, going to the creation, what happens is we give in to the idea that we are not a real place, and we stay in criticism, we stay in the fun, and we stay in the magical thinking that just keeps us where we are. We are better than this. We are much, much better than this. We have the capacity to evolve and to grow and to do amazing things. We have already done it. And we need to draw from the best that we have done and find the courage to do that again in this time in our nation building. And we can do it. We are absolutely capable of it. And that I believe. You know, Derek Walcott.
No,
not you. The real Derek Walcott. May the real Derek Walcott please stand. The Nobel laureate of the West Indies. When he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, his response, and I would say to anybody listening to this show that wants to understand us, go and do a Google Derek Walcott Nobel reception speech. Read that speech. It is one of the finest bits of literature that we have in the West Indies. Naipaul in his reception speech, likewise. Go and Google it and read it. Read it. Because what these two West Indian intellectuals and Nobel laureates took on in their reception speech. Now, this is the West Indies shining on the world stage of literature for the English language. For all people writing in the English language, these two West Indians at that stage were seen as the bright lights of English literature. In Walcott's own, and in Naipaul to a lesser extent, Walcott took on Froude head on. He took him on head on. And he doesn't call his name, but he says, when you look at our cities, you may say polyglot, ill-formed, bastardized, brought together from a hodgepodge of different customs and norms. And at the moment when you come to evaluate us, to say that this is not a real city, we will respond to you and we say, no, we are not your city. We are our city, and our city has its own norms, its own cultures, its own beauty and its own aesthetics. In other words, we are a real place. Now, when your brightest literature laureate takes on Froude in his reception speech of the Nobel Prize, and then Naipaul does a similar thing in his reception speech, you know that this is a wound that cuts real, real deep. But what do these two fine men do? What they do is they analyze, they evaluate, they create. That's what they do. They analyze, they evaluate, they create. They don't just stay in the bitter criticism, which Naipaul has been really accused of so often. But what I want to see is that both authors were at pains to demonstrate that we are a real people, we have a real culture, we have real architecture, we might be hybridized. And that's the beauty of the Caribbean. And that's the style and the swagger and the energy I mean, go to India and try to find doubles now. Go to India and try to find a wrap roti now. Go and find pilau somewhere the way we used to do it, or callaloo, or any of these things that we do. We hybridize everything. Where else in the rhythm section you have a tassa drum? Where else? Where else in the Jose celebration, a Catholic beating the drum for you? Where else? You know, that's what we do. But rather than understanding it that way, Jean Besson and Barry Chavans, two eminent Caribbean cultural anthropologists, both have said that is culture building in the Caribbean. We have in this really tight space, we have built culture in ways that people don't appreciate and have not given our ancestors credit for. The fact that we still are existing, the fact that we've achieved as much as we have against all odds, that alone should tell you we are resilient and very creative people. We're better than that. To quote Naipaul, to quote Radar again, we're better than that. So what's our challenge? You know, many cultures have turned the colonial insult on its head. The Black Americans have done it with the N-word. Now, if a white American uses that word, that's fight. But the Black American turns it on its head and says, you know, okay, well, I will use the word, and I'm taking the power out of it. And that's one way of looking at it. Our challenge is that as we play with the reality question, where is it really real for us? Where is it really real for us? Those who have enough money are educating their children to go abroad and to live abroad. That means for them, the really real is not here. I tell people when they leave and I say, it's okay, when you're ready to come back, I go pick you up at the airport. I go be right. I'll be right here picking you up. The really real has to be here. We have, and this is a philosophical concept. Plato believed that the really real was with the gods. Aristotle said, no, the really real is here amongst us. And where the really real is where you give your attention and what you see as really important, and also where you give your energy. And once you see that here is not the really real, you don't give it attention, you don't give it energy, you go into hypercriticism, you go into negativity, you go into debasing it and bringing it down, but you don't go into analysis, you're going to do into evaluation, and you're going into creation, because it's not worth it, because this is not the really real. And that's the problem that we're facing. That's a problem that we're facing.
Well, hold on. You know, I'm gonna challenge you here now. Because it's the same thing that we have with the pan. Because in your conversation, you know, here we've created something so beautiful, and yet and it creates a space for discipline, creativity, and all of these things.
Absolutely.
You know,
that's the really real. You want to see really real? Go into any panyard when they practice it and see the discipline. See, you know, the philosophy of the panyard is Ubuntu. I am because we are. And every pan man know that the man next to him, he can't be better than him. Because if he better than him, the band ain't gonna song right. And if the man next to you not doing anything right, the whole band would have to falter. So everybody responsible for everybody else.
But yet, this is my point. Why can't our leaders see this? You all spoke. I heard all you know, Duval, and so on. It can't be. Can't we see this?
Because we're trapped in this notion of not being a real place. Because we're trapped in this understanding that is not moving us from the hypercritical up the cognitive levels to creation. Because we're trapped. Lloyd Bess will say that it's not that we are irresponsible, you know, we are unresponsible. We are unable to take responsibility for ourselves. I don't believe that. I have seen in the panyard real responsibility and real discipline. I've seen it there. I've seen in different sectors of our society, real responsibility and real discipline. We're capable of more than this. We are capable of more. Now, what I want to say is that we have to ask ourselves what we're raising our children to believe. You know, our challenge is when we're playing with the reality question, are we raising another generation of Caribbean children who may not see themselves as real people and see this place as a real place? That if you really want to be real, you have to go elsewhere. Here's what George Lamin has to say in one of his fine books, Coming Home. He says, I do not think there has been anything in human history quite like the meeting of Africa, Asia, and Europe in the American archipelago that we call the Caribbean. But it is so recent since we have assumed responsibility for our own destiny that the antagonistic weight of the past is felt as an inhibiting menace. That is the most urgent task and the greatest intellectual challenge. How do we control the burden of this history and incorporate it into our collective sense of the future? That is Lamin at his finest best. It's only 60 years, you know. It's only 60 years in the life of a nation. That's real, real short. But we can't, at this moment, lose confidence in ourselves. We can't. We have created too much. We have too many examples of excellence. We have too many examples of great intellectuals that have come out from us to lose confidence in ourselves at this moment. We can't afford that. This is a moment we have to find everything that we can and pull from all those who have gone before us and recognize the reality of this place. If J.J. Thomas in the 1800s could take on a professor of Oxford and a well-known historian, then who is we? We are better than this. And we have to find a way to move away from our negativity, away from our criticism, or build on the criticism into proper analysis, then into proper evaluation, then into creating this place as a paradise that God created and intended it to be.
Keeping it real.
This is keeping it real. This is all I'm pleading for, you know. All I'm pleading for. Let us control the burden of our history. And I understand that burden, And a lot of the hypercriticism and a lot of the not a real place is the burden of the history that we have not yet found a way to deal with. And we have to find a way to deal with that burden of our history. We have to incorporate that into our collective sense of the future. We have to find a way where, regardless of race or creed or whatever it is you is, to have a collective sense of a future. We have to build this beautiful, wonderful, amazing twin island republic we call Trinidad and Tobago. We have to build it. You know, it also paralyzes us from real action to transform us from within. And that's my problem. That the hashtag movement, it paralyzes us. Our most urgent task is to arrive at the collective sense of the future, beyond tribe, beyond religion, beyond race, where we can all accept there is only one mother, Mother Trinidad and Mother Tobago, and a mother cannot discriminate amongst her children.
Wow. Yes. You know there are no more mother. If there are no more mother Africa, no more is mother.
That was one of the most beautiful sentiments that the Prime Minister that brought us into independence said to us. So the key message, words have meanings and beyond what is intended. Our long colonial history never saw us as a real place or as a real people. And this debate continues today. So I want you to answer the question, is this a real place? Is you have the answer, not me, you know. I give you the facts. I give you both sides of the question. Now it's up to you, the viewer, to answer. Is this a real place? Action step. dream about the future of our beloved Trinidad and Tobago. What would you want us to be 50 years from now? What would you want for your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, 50 years on? Where would you want Trinidad and Tobago to be? Let's dream about that. And let's make a collective dream and start working towards a future that is different from the present that we have. And my reading is Proverbs 29:18. Without vision, the people become uncontrollable. But blessed are those who keep the law.
Amen. Keeping it real, everybody, keeping it real for the future. Excellent.
Father, we ask your blessings upon us that we may experience your love and your mercy. Fill us with your love. And Lord, give us the inspiration to move our beautiful Trinidad and Tobago to the next stage of its development. We make our prayer through Christ, our Lord.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Archbishop J. Everybody, happy Lent, prayer, fasting, almsgiving. God bless you all. Pick up your Catholic news.